Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. The Military Committee Conference has just drawn to a close. We will have opening statements by Admiral Bauer and General Harem. And then we will take a couple of your questions. I would like to give the floor first to Admiral Bauer. Sir.
There we go. Good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, the Military Committee has just concluded. Our discussions covered the breadth of the security challenges facing the alliance. Without a doubt, a new era for global security has begun. It is crystal clear that this conflict is bigger than Ukraine. The entire international rules-based order is under attack. And it is up to the free, democratic nations of the world to protect it. Today, for the first time, the Allied Chiefs of Defense welcomed their Finnish and Swedish counterparts around the table as invitees. The accession of Finland and Sweden, with their impressive defense capabilities, will both enhance the security of the Baltic Sea region and strengthen the alliance as a whole. Together, we discussed how we can strengthen our collective security and how we will implement the far-reaching decisions on NATO's deterrence and defense posture that were taken by our political leadership at NATO's summit in Madrid. The Supreme Allied Commander Europe, General Cavoli, provided us with his strategic consideration on the eastern flank and across the whole spectrum of our 360 degrees approach to security. The Chiefs of Defense discussed the operationalization of the deter and defense strategy that we approved in 2020. This strategy makes sure that national plans are more closely interlinked with alliance plans. Military leaders have a common frame of reference for both alliance-wide threats and regional threats, and that we enhance the speed and effectiveness of our rapid deployable forces. We're talking about the biggest overhaul of our military structures since 1949. The planning for that started several years ago, but now we're implementing it. The Chiefs of Defense also discussed how they will sustain and increase Allied support to Ukraine. The ammunition, equipment and training that allies and other nations are delivering are all making a real difference on the battlefield. With its successes on the ground and online, Ukraine has fundamentally changed modern warfare. NATO will support Ukraine for as long as it takes. Winter is coming, but our support shall remain unwavering. Other topics on the agenda today were NATO's ongoing operations, missions and activities, including the NATO mission Iraq, NMI, and Kosovo Force, KFOR. The Chiefs of Defense dedicated a special session to diversity in our armed forces. Not only because we want to practice the values that we preach, but also because having a more diverse talent pool in our workforce increases our effectiveness on the battlefield. And crucially, creating a culture of inclusion is fundamental for trust between men and women in uniform. Without trust, we in the military cannot function. We need to keep developing and adapting. That is why Supreme Allied Commander Transformation, General Lavigne, provided us with his insights on how we can promote cooperation across domains and service branches and how we can transform our armed forces in the digital era. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to be hosted here in Tallinn and to experience firsthand the enduring spirit of the Estonian people. I want to thank General Harem wholeheartedly for the outstanding way in which the Estonian authorities have hosted this conference. Ladies and gentlemen, these are challenging times, times of great uncertainty. But we as allies are strengthened by the knowledge that there are 3.2 million servicemen and women, soon to be more, who will do whatever it takes to protect every inch of Allied territory and every single one of the 1 billion citizens who live on Allied soil. It is the solemn duty of the Chiefs of Defense to make sure they are able to fulfill their important task to the best of their abilities. We serve them as they serve the alliance. And together, we will make sure that we are ready to face any adversary in any domain, in any corner of the Euro-Atlantic area. General Harem, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So first of all, as Estonian Chief of Defense, I'm pleased to host the Allied Chiefs of Defense here in Tallinn for this year military committee meeting. And of course, I am happy to welcome the Finnish and Swedish Chief of Defense at this conference. Their accession to NATO will improve the coherence and unity of effort of the Baltic Sea region defense and will also strengthen the alliance as a whole. Throughout our discussions today, we have all shared the understanding that we are facing a dramatically changed security environment. The Euro-Atlantic area is again not at peace. Collectively, we must deny Russia the possibility to change today's rule-based international order. An aggression not answered will lead to further aggression. Our most urgent task is to support Ukraine. And as a Chief of Defense, we must continue to push our significant military help to Ukraine. We have witnessed how this help can change the course of war and hopefully will bring peace closer to the Ukrainians. In doing that, it is critical to ensure cohesion and unity of allies. The winter will be difficult, but must stick together and stay committed. The heads of states and government agreed at the Madrid summit that due to the changed security environment, we must move away from the previous tripwire approach to forward defense. Now it is up to us, the armed forces, to translate this new concept into concrete military actions. In order to ensure the required output as an alliance, we must first ensure the necessary national input in terms of defense spending and capability development. Article 3 is an equally key commitment. As our Prime Minister announced this morning, Estonian defense spending will increase for next years to nearly 3%. This will allow to establish the required divisional structure, certain enablers for it, and improve host nation support for allies. At the NATO level, forward defense is not only about the number of allied boots on the eastern border. The entire chain must be in a place. It means having the appropriate mix of national and allied in-place forces, known reinforcement, advanced plans linked to assigned forces and assigned C2. And finally, we have to regularly exercise and test all of it. Today's discussions reflected the shared understanding that we are moving in the right direction. However, we must also keep in mind that time is important. Today's decisions will take practical shape or form in a time. As an alliance, we must be able to face threats in 360 degrees. we are being challenged by different actors from the high north down to Africa, across oceans, seas, and up to the space domain. Some actors, such as Russia, are active across the globe when it comes to creating instability. And finally, today we also discussed diversity in the armed forces, and I fully agree that we can only be stronger when using all our resources and people. As a small nation with a reserve-based model, all citizens, no matter their specifics, must be able to contribute to national defense in some form. And I think Estonian conscription, reserve army, and defense league are a very good example. Thank you.
Thank you both. We will now take questions. And can I ask you please to state your name and the name of your outlet first?
Estonian Television News, Vahur Lauri is my name. My question goes to both the Admiral and the General, and it concerns actually Finland and Sweden. They are invitees this weekend here in Estonia, but Finland and Sweden have most sophisticated army in the north. Finland has a long border with Russia, and they can contribute earnestly in both protecting the Baltic region, but also in the Arctic, where so far Russia is very active. So you invited Finland and Sweden to this conference, but did you really ask them to dance? Which means that, is there already any planning before Finland and Sweden complete their struggle with Turkey for the future? What they can do, where they can be, and when? Was this discussed today? Thank you very much.
Okay, let me start by saying that the fact that they are invitees is not because we have this conference, but that is part of the whole process in NATO. So once the accession protocols are signed by all the allies, all 30 allies signed the accession protocols of Finland and Sweden in July. And then after that, the process is such that Finland and Sweden in this case, but other members in the past, automatically become invitee. It means that they are invited to every meeting that NATO has. There's only a limited number of subjects where they cannot participate in those discussions. So actually this was the first time we had a military committee in the CHODS format that was after mid-July, and therefore it is not related to the questions that you asked whether that they were invited. They are invited as a result of the process. So that is one. So they are invitees, and therefore they are here. You rightfully say that Finland and Sweden bring very capable forces. So without any doubt, I agree with that. The good news for NATO is that we get extra territory to defend as an alliance, and we get a long border with Russia. But we get also Finland and Sweden's armed forces that are very capable to help us to defend that extra territory and to defend that longer border. Russia will have a longer border with NATO without getting extra troops. So I think the accession of Finland and Sweden is beneficial for the alliance and is creating more of a problem for Russia, actually. Although we are not attacking Russia, we are a defensive alliance and we have no intentions whatsoever to attack Russia. Whether the discussions of today didn't focus very specifically on their accession, because they are invitees, they were able to listen to all the discussions. The actual discussions on how they will contribute to the plans and how they will contribute and are integrated in the alliance is happening, of course, after all the nations have ratified the accession. So after 30 allies have agreed to the accession of Finland and Sweden, then they will become a member, and then they are part of the discussions and the decisions. So they're not invited to a dance, to use your term, but they were here to learn how we discuss all these things, to learn what the discussions are about, and to get acquainted to that process.
Thank you, Admiral. Go ahead.
Thank you. Patrick Tucker from Defense One. I wonder if either of you could talk a little bit about how the discussions went today in terms of helping alliance members to meet the commitments that were put out in Madrid, particularly in terms of bulking up the eastern flank, some of the logistics discussions about how that can happen better or quickly, or possibly challenges that members brought up. Thanks.
I can talk about this in general, and maybe General Hillrem can say a little bit about Estonia. One of the discussions and decisions in Madrid has been the formation of the 8 battle groups along the eastern flank. And the implementation of that is ongoing. It means that the nations that have promised to support those 8 nations are now talking to the nations and to the Supreme Allied Commander Europe how and when and how these troops come in, what they will bring, and how the nations that are receiving them can actually properly receive them. Because sometimes the host nations need to do certain things to make sure that they can actually receive the troops, receive extra ammunition, receive extra vehicles, and make sure that they can allow and have the facilities for those additional forces to train, for example. So that is an ongoing process. There is not any particular problem at the moment, which was discussed. Some of these things take a bit of time. It doesn't happen overnight. So it is a question of identifying the forces in the sending nations. It is identifying the host nation support for the receiving nations, and then to make sure that the two are matched in a way that when the forces come in, that they are that the nation is able to receive them. So I think it was discussed in a way that everyone is extremely positive about it. The one thing that we discussed is that at some stage you will have to also show that it works. And because part of the outcome is that the battle group has a certain size in the normal state, and once there is indications and warnings that the threat goes up, you can increase that force to a larger formation. And actually, we have agreed that in the coming year, there will be a number of exercises so that we can actually show the countries, but also our publics, that that process is actually working. So I think that is one of the outcomes of today.
Yeah, I think countries made their suggestions how to move on. We did it, of course, on a different level of details. And the SACEUR, for example, can use all these ideas in further planning. When we talk, for example, about Estonia, then Estonia presented the idea to reorganize Estonian defense forces, part of our structure, to the divisional structure, which should make all kind of NATO reaction before day 0, during day 0, and after that much faster and understandable. So, like I said, obviously SACEUR, who is already informed about that, will take all these ideas and will use in next days or in future planning.
Because part of what is ongoing in the next months is that we are still working on the further detailed plans in how to deter and defend against the two threats, Russia and the terror groups. And of course, that requires a lot of thinking, and in practical terms, it needs, the outcome of that is that you will basically have the number of capabilities and troops that you require to do that properly. And then there's a discussion between NATO and the nations who is doing what of what is required to be done. But it's also good for you to understand that a meeting like this today there's a set of sessions where we were talking with the 30 and 32 and plus the invitees about all the topics in the group. And then there is always a number of moments set aside to make sure that there is bilaterals, so that the chiefs of defense of the different nations can talk to one another on specific topics. So, for example, when it comes to these battle groups, I saw a lot of chiefs of defense talk to one another when they, for example, were planning and talking about the setup of the forces that they would send to one of the 8 battle groups to make further agreement, to discuss what was necessary.
Thank you. Reuters.
Andres Sitas, Reuters. I have a question for both Admiral and General. Admiral Bauer has just said that NATO will support Ukraine all the way, and that the equipment NATO's countries are providing leading to its successes. Has Ukraine proved its ability to succeed in the battlefield, and as the further mass graves was found in previously Russian-occupied territory, is it not time for NATO countries to provide a better quality equipment to Ukraine, such as Western-built main battle tanks and Western-built infantry fighting vehicles?
First and foremost, NATO is supporting Ukraine with a package of non-lethal assistance. That was one of the decisions in Madrid. And then allies, but not only allies, also other nations. For example, when it comes to, there's a separate meeting a couple of weeks in Ramstein, where 50 nations, so that is 20 nations more than the alliance or the allies, come together and talk about how to support Ukraine to continue their ability to fight. And in the beginning, I think there was an emphasis on Soviet-type weapon systems because it was the easiest for the Ukrainian to basically receive and immediately operate with. And that's logic. Now, we are now in a phase where more and more Western systems are being handed over to Ukraine, but that also requires training. And that is also something that is ongoing. So forces are trained to actually be able to operate the weapon systems that they have received, but also to maintain it. So it is not only operate with it, but also if you use it in an environment of a war, things need maintenance regularly. So that is the sort of thing that is ongoing. And I think you will see more and more that the Soviet-type weapon systems that were still available in NATO, in some of the NATO countries, are basically gone. And so more and more it will be Western weapon systems that are being given to Ukraine. So it's an automatic process, basically.
Yeah, if I may, I think it wasn't our main topic. So I would like to step aside from today's event and say, of course, they need more support, and sooner they liberate these occupied areas, better it is. Because today we see that even in deep area where the occupation is happening, and maybe there are not happening very intensive battle, so it's peaceful occupied area, the Russia is murdering and torturing continuously. So we may think that some towns which are not in battles, it's an environment where people can live, but actually not. We find more and more graves with hundreds of people killed. So again, outside from this event, I say yes, we should give, because that wasn't really a main topic today. Thank you.
Postimees.
Yeah, you said that the war in Ukraine has changed fundamentally modern warfare. Could you give a bit more specific examples of things that maybe will be already taught at military academies due to the lessons learned from there?
Yeah. Actually, we've seen some very interesting combinations of civilian military cooperation. If you remember that Elon Musk gave away his satellite systems and satellite terminals to Ukraine to allow Ukraine to actually continue support with satellite systems. That is a new thing. That is a new thing in modern warfare, where there is a combination of governments and non-governmental organizations, in this particular case a private company. The other thing is that the Ukrainians have been very creative with with the use of the weapon systems that they had been given. They use them in a way sometimes that we actually do not normally do. So there is systems that are normally used at sea that are now used on land vehicles and then used from those land vehicles to basically target ships of the Russians at sea. So those are things that are very interesting to see, and other than the other thing that has happened is that the training of NATO over the 8 years and of a number of allies since 2014 basically assured that the Ukrainian army changed its way of fighting from the older Russian style that we see in Ukraine at the moment to the more modern way of warfare that we see fit when it comes to that, and that is, for example, mission command. And it requires it means that you tell your soldiers why they are fighting, you tell your soldiers what they need to achieve, and then you leave the how to as low tactical level as possible. And that is something that the Ukrainians have been very successful. You actually see with, for example, the Kharkiv offensive, that very low tactical units, like a platoon, that's a group of 30 soldiers with a young lieutenant in charge, are taking the initiative, responding to a changing situation in the battlefield, where the Russians are basically waiting for orders from higher command before they can actually respond to that.
Thank you. And we have time for just one more question. Go ahead.
Greta Volmer from Delphi. I have a question for General Herem. You have said before that Estonia's priority is not a permanent United States base in Estonia. So are you or is NATO still holding the opinion that a new permanent base in Estonia is not needed? Thank you.
So first of all, we must find the balance between in-place forces and forces which may come here, which are exercising the deployment here. So, and then we have to find out how many additional permanent military bases we need here. But yes, I can say that I don't think we need brigade-size units permanently here in Estonia. I don't think it's efficient. I would prefer many other capabilities, including brigade-size units, which can be deployed to Estonia very quickly. But most of the time, they can stay there where they have their families, their own environment, and all this. But of course, if the threat is growing, that's the whole idea, then more troops are deployed here, and who knows how long it takes. In this case, the temporary may last like years. But right now, our first plan should be to find the balance between in-place forces and reinforcement.
I agree with that completely. And although you didn't ask a question to me, let me add, because this is important, that people understand why the military answer to these sorts of questions is that we actually think the best option is to have a lot of flexibility. And if you have fixed forces in all the countries, for example, then the enemy, your opponent, will always look where there is a weak spot, and they will attack there. And then you have to respond to that attack with forces that are available and not fixed in all sorts of places. So the combination of the battle groups that we have now and forces behind that to basically bring to the front, so to say, if that is the front, that is what militarily is the wisest thing to do.
thank you all. The next Military Committee meeting and Chiefs of Defense session will be held at the beginning of next year. I want to thank you for your coming here. Thank everybody online for following this, and we wish you a pleasant evening. Thank you.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye.